My name is Mark Baumgartner, and on behalf of my co-authors, Leah Baumwell, Sean Brilliant, and Elizabeth Becker, I'd like to talk to you today about developing requirements and specifications for a gear location marking system for ropeless fishing. And so just to orient us, what is gear location? What is a gear location marking system? Well, it's designed to replace the function of buoys and radar reflectors for buoyless or ropeless fishing. If we're going to take away end lines and buoys, we have to replace their functionality. And those buoys and the gear location marking system allows fixed gear to be located by fixed and mobile fishermen to avoid gear conflict, by enforcement for inspection and monitoring, and potentially by regulators for fisheries management. We think that the system should employ a known method or set of methods for determining and communicating the location of the gear, so we all know that it's how it works and whether it's working. And we would contend that it's very important to incorporate interoperability in gear location marking systems, as this is essential for operation and cost control. And interoperability simply means that if one fisherman is using manufacturer A's gear and the fisherman that's fishing right next to him is using manufacturer B's gear, that they have the ability to still locate each other's gear despite the fact that different manufacturers make that gear. So the challenge today, really, in the greatest obstacle to developing a commercially viable gear location marking system is the universal adoption of a single method or set of methods to locate gear on the seafloor. And there are several methods. The ones that I'm aware of is surface marking with GPS, localizing using acoustics, using a transponder to simply range to get a distance estimate between a ship and the gear on the seafloor. There's another means of localizing gear using ranging, but also using a transducer on the ship that allows the estimation of bearing or the direction to the gear. And then finally, I spoke last year about a new method of self-localization for the gear called successive acoustic receive time, or SART localization. And you can go to my presentation last year on ropeless.org if you want to learn more about that. So we have these four methods, and maybe one or a combination of some of these methods will work very well, but we need to decide. And so which of these do we develop? And the answer to that really depends on what we need the system to do. And there has been to date no rigorous or systematic way of figuring out what it is that we need this system to do. And that's part of what we're doing as part of this project. And one of the important questions is who gets to decide which method is used. Our federal governments in the US and Canada have not begun processes to decide on a method, nor do I suspect they will. We would contend that it's the community of fishers, enforcement, and regulators who need to decide this with input from engineers, scientists, conservationists, and gear manufacturers. And so how is it that this community would decide? Well, that's the process that we're going to talk about today in this talk. We've initiated a process by which this community could come together to decide which method is best and how to move forward with developing devices that can provide gear location marking services. So the process we've initiated is to conduct interviews with stakeholders to collect initial requirements of a gear location marking system. Simply what it is, we're trying to figure out what it is that this gear location marking system needs to do. And then we want to host a workshop to discuss and agree to a final list of requirements. We want to describe each gear location method in detail so all the workshop participants understand what these gear location methods do and their pros and cons. We want to compare each of the gear location methods to the requirements in a way that allows us to determine which method best meets the requirements. When I say us, I mean the community. And then we would like to see come out of the workshop a small technical working group, potentially with workshop participants, but potentially with outside experts as well, to develop minimum specifications for a device that can implement the chosen method and actually do gear location marking in a way that can be made interoperable, can be offered by many companies. So just some detail about the interviews. Again, the interviews are designed to collect information about what different stakeholders think a gear location marking method needs to do for fishermen, enforcement, and regulators. And so we're doing this by asking a set of questions to kind of spark discussion. Some of these questions are listed here. For instance, how far apart is gear usually set in your area, which will tell us something about how accurate the localizations need to be for a gear location marking system. How far away from gear do you want to be able to detect it? For some fishermen, line of sight is fine. They work in line of sight with buoys today. But for some offshore fisheries, they need to see over the horizon, and that's what radar reflectors are used to see the opposite ends of gear. So, and that's in cases where trawls are very, very long. So we want to collect all of this information and really understand the needs, and then to document those as a set of requirements. So when we get to the workshop stage, we want to finalize those requirements and then compare all those methods, those 4 methods, to each of the requirements, sort of as a checklist, how many of the boxes do each of these methods check against these requirements. And we hope that that will be sufficient to allow the community to choose a method that best meets the requirements. And as I mentioned before, we want to form a technical working group that can take those that method and those requirements and develop specifications for devices that can be provided to companies so that they know exactly what they need to be building. Today, they don't know what they need to build, and this is a way to get them exact specifications for what it is that we need them to build. So post-workshop, the specifications that come out of the technical working group will be shared with the workshop participants just to ensure that they meet the original requirements. We want to provide these specifications to companies for development, and competent companies have already been identified by NOAA's Yet To process, so we have already a preliminary list of companies to provide these specifications to. And I encourage you to see Kristen Kahn's talk immediately following this one, if you're watching in order, that's to learn more about the Yet To process and the companies that have been identified. And of course, any development effort is going to require funding. This is particularly challenging for gear location marking because there is no market for ropeless fishing right now, and so companies do not have a lot of incentive to spend an enormous amount of research and development dollars of their own to develop a system for ropeless fishing for which there is no market right now. And the future of ropeless is sufficiently murky that it's difficult to think that companies are going to invest their own dollars in this. And so we would contend that philanthropic support, either through federal government or private funds, public or private funds, can be used to jumpstart this development effort by providing funding directly to companies to design devices and build prototypes. And this is the idea behind the Fishing Gear Location Marking Fund. It was established explicitly for this purpose and is seeking to raise $1 million for prototype development. And I encourage you to see Andrea Bogomoni's talk after Kristen's that describes this fund. So where are we in the process? We've been doing interviews since August 2020. We've held 11 small group interviews with around 5 people at a time, so we've spoken to a little over 50 people so far. You can see which sectors we've talked to, and we still have some fair number of more interviews to do in the coming weeks. And you can see who it is that we still yet need to talk to. So if you haven't been contacted yet and you're on this list, you probably will be shortly. So we want to complete these interviews and compile initial requirements by year's end. We want to circulate those requirements and layman's descriptions of potential gear location marking methods to workshop participants, hold the workshop virtually in early 2020, have the small technical working group deliver specifications by midwinter 2020, and then do a request for proposals from the Fishing Gear Location Marking Fund in late winter 2020 to begin design and development of compliant devices. And as I mentioned, the Yet 2 process that Kristen's going to talk about gives us a nice base of companies to which we can send this request for proposals. So with that, I'll end, and I'd just like to thank all the stakeholders that have participated in the requirements collection process so far, and thank you in advance to those who will still participate yet. Thank you for your time and your attention.